When I was about 13, my mom and dad invited round our previous neighbors from the block of flats we lived in until I was about 5 years old. Anyway, I'd been sent to bed but could still hear everyone talking about this and that, until the woman neighbor said, "Hey, Digsy's mom, do you remember when Digsy used to complain that there was someone in his room? Well, there's a family that just moved into the floor above who have a 3-year-old son. He is complaining of the exact same thing Digsy did." This creeped me out. I had no recollection of any of this, so the next day I asked my mom. Her first reaction was, "You don't remember?" Then she told me all about the weird stuff that used to happen. Footsteps up and down the hall, shit going missing and stuff. She said the final thing to happen was when she was listening to a record one day, and it started to slow down, like someone was holding a finger gently on the platter till it finally came to a stop. My mom said she snapped at this point and started shouting, "Will you leave us the fuck alone?" As soon as she said this, the record went straight back to playing normally, and we never experienced anything again. I've never experienced anything like that since, and these days I'm quite skeptical of such stories, but I believe my mom. Strangest thing is how I found out about it, from someone else 10 years later experiencing something similar. Back when I was in college, there's an old dormitory that was empty and locked up. The first floor windows were covered up with thick black curtains and the doors had chains and padlocks on them. Well, my second year of school, I got my EMT certification and started working for the campus EMS squad. That was easily my coolest job ever, and there were perks other students couldn't get. One of those were keys for everything. So obviously, we used those keys to go everywhere. Most places were pretty boring. My now best friend, who was the other EMT I worked with, decided to make the old dorm our last hangout place. We would sneak in with friends and drink there on the weekends or nights where we didn't have class. We usually stayed on the first floor on one of the wings of the dorm, the one closest to the back entrance. We didn't stray because the place was dirty and had cobwebs. So one night we were drinking in one room we set up with tables and chairs that we had ceased. We were all together, nobody was missing when somebody very close to our room and very loudly screamed, "Who the fuck is there?" To which one of us drunkenly responded, "Who the fuck do you think it is?" A very confused voice responded back, "You're not coming with me then, John." They sounded like they were walking away from us towards the center of the building, away from the stairwell. Incidentally, none of us were named John. A few minutes later, we could hear on the floor above us, a very old building floor that's super thick, a rumbling sound that kind of shook the walls. The rumbling stopped above us with a giant crash. Stuff officially just got creepy. We all run up the stairs and make our way to the hallway above the one we were hanging out at. Right at where our room would be on the first floor was a giant filing cabinet on wheels. It was just there. Nobody else was there. You could see the wheel tracks on the floor because it was dusty as hell, but there were no other footprints around besides our own. We all damn bolted without getting our stuff. No stopping to get our booze, or turning off our radio, or turning off our battery-powered lantern. So we obviously have to go back and get our stuff. We waited a few days. A friend of mine and I went one evening to go get it. First we go to the window and see if we can see if any of our stuff is in there. My friend looks in. I didn't. He said he thought he saw somebody in the doorway. I thought he was acting stupid because of what happened the other night. We sneak in and make it to the room and get our stuff. Somewhere down in, towards the center of the building, we hear a door shut. It's completely dark that way. We hear a door closer, open, and we don't wait to find out what the hell that's about. So, I'm not a person who believes in supernatural stuff, and the same goes for my friends. We decided that we needed to figure out what the hell was going on in the building. So about 6 of us devised a pretty easy plan to go about with. We circled the building one night and checked all the doors and windows to make sure they were all locked up. Then we went to our usual entrance, left 2 people on the inside of it to make sure nobody came in or out. Then the rest started going from dorm room to dorm room checking to make sure nobody else was there. We'd say, "Hello?" and obviously get no response. We make it through our hallway we hang out at, and our tensions ease up. One of the people at the outside door moves up to where we stopped, and we go to the second floor where the filing cabinet was. Because it's back at the original place with the wheel tracks with no fucking footprints. Tension in the groups rise. We start doing the whole, hello? And no response to the thing again. We get about halfway through the hall and one of us gets the idea of saying, "Oh, come on, it's your friend Johnny." A giant thud below us. Muffled screams from the two we left as lookouts, probably saying something along the lines of, "What the fuck is that?" A giant thud behind us on the same floor where nobody could have been because we went through those rooms and we would have noticed somebody else slamming a door right fucking behind us. It turns into a race to get back out the way we came, past the doors that were just slammed. As we get into our hallway, we can hear doors opening and closing in a way that something was coming toward us from the center of the building again. We get a few hundred yards away before we all stop running and make sure we all made it. We found another place to hang out after that. It's torn down now and a real dorm is built over it. Edit. I forgot to mention something else. We never put it together that this was never a dorm, even though the hallways were really wide, and that some of the rooms would have windows next to the doors like an office usually does. This was the type of room we hung out in because it was a bigger room. Well, once in a while we would notice that the window would get foggy, like when you breathe on a foggy window, but it was always on the hallway side of the window, like if somebody was looking at us through the glass and watching us. We never put that together until after the whole fleeing and terror incident. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out toward the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing to..." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at us both and slowly stood up with a knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. Edit. Oh yeah, I forgot that after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door what was happening. Apparently, he had been waiting on his porch with a shotgun when she walked by. He pointed it at her and just said, "Keep moving, bitch." Update. I just talked to my mom and she said that they never really found out the whole story, but apparently she was crazy and off her medication. Her and her husband got into a fight and she tried to attack him with a knife, but didn't seriously hurt him. When he got her out of the house, she cut herself with a knife, either trying to commit suicide or make it look like her husband did it. The police never talked to us about it, so that's just what they heard from the woman's neighbors. My wife and I bought our first house in February of 2010. We immediately fell in love with it as soon as we laid eyes on it. It had everything we wanted, plus a few extras. For the first month, everything was great. Lots of painting and decorating, getting it just the way we wanted. Then, weird things started to randomly happen. First, it was small things, like things upstairs being moved. put in completely different rooms than where they belonged. I chalked it up to my wife just forgetting to put things back where they belonged. The house also started to creak, pretty loud. This is a fairly new house, so I just figured it was probably settling, as most new houses tend to do. One day, the wife and I were preparing dinner in the kitchen. Our stairs sit next to the kitchen entrance, so any noises upstairs were clearly audible into the kitchen. I turned off the water at the sink, and as soon as I did, we both heard a cough. We had no kids, and no one was visiting. The windows were all shut. The television was not on. This sent the coldest chill down my spine, and I could feel the blood running out of my face. I looked to my wife, and she too had gone pale and had this look of absolute fear. Someone was in our house, and they were upstairs. I quickly grabbed the sharpest knife I could find, and my wife called the police. I walked to the bottom of the steps and stood silently and heard a loud pop/creak, just like the ones I had always heard the house make. My hands were shaking, and my wife was whispering to the 911 operator, telling them we think we may have a robber in our home. The police arrive in minutes. Thankfully, they had been patrolling nearby. The officer walks slowly up the stairs, gun drawn. He calls out, "This is the police. Is anyone upstairs?" No response. I'm right behind him, walking up the stairs. We look into the first bedroom and closet. Empty. No one in the half bath either. Last room is my office, where I have my PC. No one in the room or the closet. I felt the tension ease away and felt like a complete tool, making this officer search the house, only to find nothing. We turned to walk out the room, and right above us, creak. I just about shat bricks. In my office closet, there is an attic access. The officer pulls the steps down and again calls out, "Is anyone up there? This is the police." No response. He turns on his flashlight and peeks his head up. He finds a man in his 40s kneeling there in the attic, looking dead at him. Gun drawn, he tells the man to come out and put his hands behind his head. They arrest the man. He didn't say a word the whole time and would not look anyone in the eye. He was scruffy looking and had dirty clothes on. I don't think either of us have fully gotten over it. After questioning the man in the police station, we found out that he was a homeless man who found refuge in the house while it was still on the market. He said the doors were unlocked, and so he stayed there. Apparently, a realtor must have forgotten to lock the door after showing someone the house. He said that when people would come to the house, he would hide in the second floor attic. We bought the house, and this guy was living in it for a whole month, without us even knowing. It really freaks me out just thinking about it. My family has lived in rural Nebraska since they immigrated from Germany in the mid-1800s. Near the turn of the century, disease was pretty rampant in the homesteading area, and it killed off members of almost every family. When someone died from the illness, time was of the essence in burying them as to not let the virus spread from the deceased to living. This meant no wake periods. So an aunt of some unknown number of greats preceding her relationship to me dies of some disease, and she gets buried in the family cemetery on the homestead. So it wasn't too surprising that after the funeral, the 2 dogs stuck near the grave. The rest of the family began to think something of it, when a week and a half later the dogs were still visiting her grave almost constantly. But they weren't just at the grave. They were visibly distressed, frantic, and often barking while there. This goes on for maybe 2 weeks when the family decides to check it out. They dig the casket up and open it. The deceased's hair had all been pulled out. Her fingers are raw and bloody and mangled from where, on the inside of the casket door, they can see deep scratches in the wood. She was comatose when they buried her, and she came to while underground, spending probably her last 5 or so days alive in a buried casket.